Good afternoon and welcome to the Ordinance Committee meeting of the City of Santa Barbara for May 18th, 2021. Ms. Crescente, if you would take the roll, please.
Council members Nedden.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez.
Present.
And Chair Jordan.
Here. And then we will open public comment for items that are not on the agenda today. And Ms. Crescente, I'll let you work that process for us.
Thank you. This is your opportunity to speak for items that are not on the agenda. If you raise your hand within the app, we can give you an opportunity to speak now for items not on the agenda. Chair Jordan, it looks like no one has raised their hands.
Okay, then we will close public comment and address the item today. The subject is amendment of section 9.97.010 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code to prohibit sitting or lying down on public sidewalks on Milpas Street between Carpinteria Street and Cannon Perdido Street. And I would imagine, Mr. Kalan, you are waiting in the wings.
Thank you, Chair Jordan. So today we are presenting a response to the council's direction from last June to examine whether the city's ordinance that forbids sitting or lying down on sidewalks could be applied to Milpas Street between Carpinteria and Cannon Perdido. Next slide, please. So let's start at the beginning. What does this ordinance do? A sit-lie ordinance forbids people from sitting or lying down on certain sidewalks during certain hours of the day. I emphasize certain because the case law is clear, as we'll discuss in a minute, that banning sitting or lying down in the entire city would present legal problems. The ordinance includes a number of exceptions that are needed for legality as well, such as exceptions for people who are disabled and need the use of an assistive device, medical emergencies, or lawful parades and demonstrations where people might take up positions on the sidewalk. We'll talk about why those exceptions are important in the legal discussion as well. Finally, most of the sit-lie ordinances, including Santa Barbara's, include a requirement that whoever is enforcing the ordinance give a prior warning before any citation can be issued. That means that if a city enforcer encounters someone sitting or lying down on one of the sidewalks that are included, they must give them a warning that what they're doing is unlawful before writing any sort of citation. Next slide, please. So Santa Barbara's original ordinance was enacted in 1997, and as you can see, it applied only to State Street during the hours of 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Next slide. The council amended the ordinance first in May of 2015 to expand the hours beyond 9 p.m. At that time, with what was really quite vibrant nightlife on State Street, conflicts between people frequenting or using the businesses on State Street and others were occurring later at night. So the council moved the time to 2 a.m. In addition, the council included the parts of our sidewalk environment on State Street that are immediately adjacent to and really part of the travelway. So the council added a prohibition against using planters, railings, or statues for seating and obstructing the sidewalk as well. Next slide. The key case law came 1 year before Santa Barbara enacted its original ordinance in 1997. That's the case of Roulette versus City of Seattle. The court was a little bit off the cuff in describing the rationale for the ordinance, but the quote on your screen is important. The point of this ordinance is not to punish any person, certainly not to punish any person who lacks housing. The point of this ordinance is to keep the sidewalk free for people to walk on. Next slide. Roulette was followed by another Ninth Circuit case in 2006. Now, I want to emphasize that this case has since been vacated, so it doesn't constitute good law. Nonetheless, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, our federal court of appeals, has referred to this case a number of times, including most recently in the case called Martin v. City of Boise, which we'll talk about, that dealt with sleeping. So in Jones, Los Angeles ordinance barred sitting or lying down at all times and at all places in Los Angeles. The court concluded that people who needed to rest, people who needed to sleep, were put in the position of choosing whether to live or die or follow the law. And that, the court concluded, was cruel and unusual punishment. So Jones, while vacated, really set the Ninth Circuit down the path of looking at sleep and rest as really involuntary human functions, human needs that have to be considered in the context of a sit-lie ordinance. Next slide, please. So most recently, and the one you've probably heard most about of late, is Martin v. City of Boise. There, the court concluded that it is unlawful to prosecute a person for sleeping on public property when there's no place for them to go. Again, I want to emphasize this and repeat it. We cannot prosecute someone for sleeping in public if there's nowhere for them to go. Next slide, please. Martin explained its reasoning relying on that vacated Jones case from Los Angeles. And we see now a consistent theme out of the Ninth Circuit that ordinances that criminalize behaviors related to homelessness, like sleeping or being in a location on public property, can implicate Eighth Amendment cruel and unusual punishment values. Next slide. Now, having said all of that, how can we justify or warrant or rationalize an ordinance that addresses sitting and lying on sidewalks? As the Ninth Circuit said in Roulette in 1996, sidewalks are for walking. We don't have to torture that basic concept. And in a busy commercial area, obstructions on the sidewalk necessarily force people into the street. And that can be extremely dangerous in different locations. Likewise, groups congregated on the sidewalks can create nuisance and criminal behavior. So last June, when the council asked that we look at this ordinance, we were clear, as we've been all along, that we need a solid factual justification for doing it. In other words, what is it about Milpas Street that warrants a sit-lie ordinance? Next slide. We set about a process to understand the facts related to Milpas Street so that the city council could have a proper basis to make a decision on whether to extend the sit-lie ordinance. First of all, the city's GIS staff prepared detailed maps based on aerial photos, which have been presented to you in your packet. I'm going to display just a couple of those, but I want to call them to your attention. Secondly, our investigator took those maps and did a field report based on actual facts on the ground on Milpas Street. In addition, our investigator contacted a number of businesses along Milpas to gauge their interest in this ordinance. Next slide, please. So this is an aerial photograph of the 200 block of Milpas. And if I have my bearing straight, in the top left center portion of this slide, you're looking at the Trader Joe's parking lot on Milpas. I wanted to call this to your attention because you will see just barely the outlines of the sidewalk as well as some colored dots. If we can go to the next slide, I can explain how to use these maps. The legend on these maps identify all of the obstructions that we have in our GIS system that are located on the sidewalk. And so you see that it runs from news racks to traffic boxes to street lights. Next slide, please. When we zoom in on an intersection, when the council looks at these maps, you can see, for example, that in the top right corner, underneath the tree cover, we have a public trash bin. That tree cover on this map is part of the reason we needed our investigator to get out in the field. Next slide. Our investigator's field report adds annotations to these maps. They're difficult to see on this slide, but I want to call them out for you. Again, we are looking generally in the top left at the Trader Joe's parking lot on Milpas. If you look at the former gas station at the corner of Milpas and I think it's Montecito there, I may be getting it wrong. You can see 4 red X's. Our investigator marked the narrowest part of each block of Milpas and annotated that in the report you have. So what we can see here is that the narrowest point was only 3 feet 1 inch wide, or 37 inches. Likewise, on the west sidewalk, the sidewalk narrowed to as little as 2 feet and 10 inches. Next slide. Why does that matter? Our investigator reached a number of factual determinations based on his field work and these maps. And for what it's worth, I concur with them. First, the Milpas sidewalk corridor between Carpinteria and Canyon Perdido has several permanent structures that significantly limit the area for walking and pedestrian use. Secondly, the vehicle traffic on Milpas is heavy, at times very heavy. And third, the traffic creates a significant risk for a pedestrian to go around an obstruction on the sidewalk and move into a travel lane. I want to also point out, I don't have it in the slides, but I did cover in the report the effect of recent legislation that broadly legalizes the use of push carts on our sidewalks in residential and commercial areas. Our office, in conjunction with Mr. Casey's office, will be coming forward with 2 ordinances in the near future. One which addresses sidewalk vendors, push carts. I know that the council has observed, as have the many members of the public who've been corresponding with both our investigator and our prosecutor here, there are now a number of regular vendors coming in during the week and weekends and setting up at various corners. In addition, the push carts proposed in our ordinance can be quite large, sometimes as long as 6 feet and as wide as 40 or so inches. So we have to imagine a Milpas street that has numerous push cart vendors on a busy weekend morning when people are out shopping and working and generally doing their daily business. Next slide. Those factual determinations are really the key to justifying the ordinance legally. I think that the council has every legal right to enact this ordinance. Recognize again that the limitations on this ordinance require a prior warning. They provide exceptions for people who have a medical emergency or who are disabled. And we've found the ordinances to be useful and workable both on State Street and last year when the council extended the ordinance to the Cacique underpass during the COVID-19 crisis. That's all I have. Chair Jordan, I'd be happy to answer questions for you or the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colon. So questions from committee members. Councilmember Snedden.
Thank you, Chair Jordan. Thank you, Mr. Kalan. So I believe that we were ready to extend this sit-lie ordinance when it came to us last June. And I really appreciate the extra due diligence and in the report that the measured widths and the photographs and the GIS and really valuable in adding to our justifications and the determinations. I just have a question about between last June and now, or when this first came to us, what has happened to our enforceability of sit-lie with COVID restrictions and encampments? And I know there's you really emphasized without someplace else to go. And previously that was shelter beds, but now I'm wondering, does that include if there are parks or other places that aren't restricted, is that also counted as someplace else to go? So just sort of what has COVID done to the restrictions, and when or do we expect that might shift again, and what impact would that have?
Thank you, Councilmember Snedden and Chair Jordan. The COVID put the brakes on enforcement of sit-lie because the courts did not want to bring jurors in. In practice, the sit-lie ordinance is enforced with a very light hand, meaning it is used when we have a recidivist, namely somebody with multiple prior violations who simply will not leave the sidewalk location. So it has not been enforced since the Cacique underpass, and that's been a function of the courts, not our office. We brought a number of cases. I advised the council that a trial court dismissed one of our sit-lie cases. We appealed it to the appellate division of the Superior Court that likewise upheld that dismissal. I read that to mean that 4 of our best judges were telling us to wait until COVID was done before trying to bring in a jury. Having said that, if you think about all of the area covered by the city's sit-lie ordinances, we're talking only about State Street, 1 block of Haley Street, and a block of Cacique. Adding Milpas would bring the total area covered probably under 5%, maybe under 2% of the city. So the short answer, given in a long response, is that there are many, many other places in the city where people can sleep lawfully during the day rather than on the sidewalk of Milpas Street.
Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Further questions from committee members? I just have one, I think, Mr. Kalan. So you mentioned the extension of the time that was done in the past on State Street. It was extended until 2 a.m. And I think you referenced just the foot traffic there due to kind of like the entertainment zone-ish kind of thing. Does the one on Milpas need to also go to 2 a.m. and is that the reason, or is it just easy to keep it the same? And does that make it less defensible?
Chair Jordan, that's an excellent question. I think customizing the time is a good thing to do if the council wishes to do it. I don't think it's essential, and there are 2 reasons. One, 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. is a substantial stretch that someone could sleep on the sidewalk on Milpas if they chose to. Secondly, they only need to move 20 feet off of Milpas onto a side street to take refuge. So while the time is different than what the roulette case had with 9 p.m. in 1996, 2 a.m. I think is justifiable. If the council wished to tighten it down, that would certainly be justifiable too. In all candor, I don't think, unless there's an active obstruction, meaning people being blocked, I seriously doubt the police would be interested in enforcing this.
And it's easy to, not that I'm out at 1 o'clock in the morning on State Street, but it's easy to anecdotally know what's going on, particularly in the, the 400, 500, 600, 700 blocks at that time of night. But I have zero clue, frankly, what's going on at 1 o'clock in the morning on Milpas Street. Do we do any type of evidence gathering there to bolster that time, or are you just pretty comfortable that we can set whatever time we want because of the reasons you just listed?
We were not out there on Milpas between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. However, we did talk to the businesses that are there. And I would add this. I think this ordinance has an aspirational component, meaning it is part of what the city wants Milpas to become. And so I think as you look down the road towards additional housing being constructed and service-related businesses, the 2 a.m. hour can be justified. But again, there's absolutely no reason you couldn't change that if you wanted.
Okay, fair enough. I don't see any other questions, so Mr. Sante, we'll go to public comment. I see some people on the list. I would imagine some people want to comment.
Thank you, Chair Jordan. Again, if you'd like to comment on this item, please raise your hand within the app. And currently we have one speaker that would, he lowered his hand. We'll give it a minute. Chair Jordan, no one has their hand raised at this point.
Very well.
I take that back. We will
Okay.
go to Natalia Gavoni.
Okay.
Natalia Gavoni, please go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Jordan and
Morning.
committee members. I just, first of all, want to thank you for finally addressing this issue for the Milpas community, for Milpas Street and the community and the residents. It is imperative that we do get this sit-lie ordinance for Milpas. As a business owner on that corridor, I can't even tell you how many times I have had the unfortunate experience of dealing with people sitting, lying, passed out on this street. It's scary. It's a deterrence for the businesses there in that district, as well as the residents who live there. It's unsafe walking on that street. And again, I have more than once have had to walk on the street, which is scary. As Mr. Colon has mentioned, it's unsafe and the traffic is heavy. So that is not an option, nor should it be, to have residents or visitors for that matter, walk on Milpas Street. So I am urging you to definitely, please pass this. We need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers, Ms. Crisante?
Yes, our next speaker will be Nadia Abushanov. Nadia Abushanov, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nadia Abushanov and I live in the West Side neighborhood. I sent you a written public comment and I just do have concerns that this ordinance will still be used to target people experiencing homelessness and further criminalize homelessness and mental health issues. I understand the efforts that Mr. Cologne outlined to that wouldn't be the case, but I just honestly don't see a reason for passing this ordinance other than to try to address homelessness in this sort of backwards way. But I just am concerned that it's just moving people further out of sight, further down the line, and not really doing anything to address the actual reason that people need to be sitting and lying down in public places. So yeah, I just would rather see the council and the ordinance committee working on true solutions to homelessness and mental health issues and inequity and things like that, rather than yeah, criminalizing sitting and laying down in city streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Another speaker, Ms. Crisante?
Chair Jordan, our next speaker will be Crystal Barros. Crystal Barros, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, City Attorney, Chair Jordan, Council, Ordinance Committee members. As a resident of the East Side who's been here for decades, Ms. Abunashet, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher your name, Bushanab. Thank you for your comments, but we are addressing actual reasons for the homelessness here, working with SB Act, working with PATH, working with Santa Barbara East Side Society. We are doing, and so many other organizations in town. We are working with city mental health and mental wellness, just countless organizations in town, CityNet, to try to address the problems with concerns that we have around homelessness and finding homes for those unhoused. We are not trying to criminalize their behavior. Rather, we are trying to keep our own city streets safe here. As a pedestrian and a person who drives and a person who rides my bicycle in my neighborhood on a regular basis, I can tell you there's been many a times when I have been frightened and concerned about and just plain quit riding my bike for a while, or won't walk in certain areas because you can't go on the sidewalk, or if you do, it smells like toileting. And it's just very, very challenging. So to live here on the East Side, I'm thankful for all the work that's being done on so many levels, addressing the actual reasons for the concerns of homelessness, and also the safety of everyone, of all people in the neighborhood and in the community, the greater community. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Another speaker, Ms. Crisante?
Chair Jordan, our next speaker is Natasha Todorovic. Natasha Todorovic, please go ahead.
So I live on the East Side. My business is on the East Side. I walk Milpas and our many streets frequently. When we have a parade in the city of Santa Barbara, people have to pull a permit because it blocks streets and sidewalks. When we have a protest, people have to pull a permit because it blocks sidewalks. The fire marshal requires that sidewalks are clear. That way they can access buildings that they have to go into should that need arise. I can't tell you how many times I have been forced to walk in the shared lane because somebody has been strewn themselves across the sidewalk, lying in their own vomit and urine and so forth. And I've had to walk around them, and to walk around them, I need to step into the street. We have very narrow sidewalks on Milpas. In some places, you can't even walk two people side by side. So we have to keep our sidewalks clear. We've got kids walking here to school, after school. We've got parents with baby strollers walking along the sidewalks. The mess that we have been having to deal with these years that we have been fighting against, we need this ordinance. And if we allow people to sleep and lie and just do whatever they want, well, we might as well kiss the city goodbye. We have to have some decorum. We have to put certain standards on behavior, and we can ask people to change their behavior. That is allowable. And when we ask them not to be drunk and passed out on the street, not to lie there, not to block the sidewalk, that is a reasonable demand. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers, Ms. Crisante?
Our next speaker will be Jesse Espinoza. Jesse Espinoza, please go ahead. Jesse, you're self-muted. If you can unmute yourself. Jesse Espinoza, you can unmute
Okay,
yourself.
there you go. Thank you, council members and Mr. Kalan for letting me speak. This ordinance does need to be put in order because me too, as a resident of the East Side, as Chris Barros, Natalia, and Natasha have said, it has been out of control. It has been like this for too long, and I've had too many personal experiences with the homeless on the street. And all I'm going to say is that there needs to be something put in place because it is a little out of control, and it is very hard to walk. I've seen people try to go around, like Natalia said and Natasha said, with strollers. They're afraid to go down the street, and there's no room, and it just needs to be put in place. That's all I need to say. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. More speakers, Ms. Crisante?
I believe our final speaker will be Sebastian Aldana. Sebastian Aldana, please go ahead. Sebastian Aldana, you are self-muted. Go ahead and unmute. There you go.
Okay, very good. Let me see. Hello, Ordinance Committee. As a 18-year East Side resident, this issue is long overdue. Once again, my name is Sebastian Aldana. With this ordinance, the residents and business owners can have a clean environment. In my opinion, that's just a basic fundamental the neighborhood needs. But the ordinance would have to be enforced. The ordinance needs to be enforced, and also plenty of outreach services so the individuals in need can receive services also. So this way, everybody has a clean environment, and it's a win-win for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers, Ms. Crisante?
Chair Jordan, we do not have any further speakers for this item.
Okay, we will close public comment and bring it to the committee for more questions or discussion. Councilmember Snedden.
Thank you, Chair Jordan. I'm prepared to make the determinations that there's a limited area for walking and pedestrian use, and that's even on an unobstructed day, it's difficult. I can speak from experience to push a stroller. I pushed a wheelchair on that street. It's very difficult, even if it's unobstructed. The vehicular traffic on Milpas is heavy and does create a risk if you do have to step out into traffic with a significant risk to pedestrians. I will make the motion to move this forward. I want to include, though, to some of the public commenters that absolutely we need to be doing everything we can to be addressing the root causes of homelessness and to be putting our resources behind that effort. And in some ways, well, I'll leave it at that. It's a high priority for our city council. We've made that really clear, and we'll continue to put our efforts there. But this is a a matter of safety for residents to be able to walk on the sidewalks unobstructed. And you know, it's not a happy ordinance to move forward. I just believe it's a necessary one. Thank you.
Did you make a motion?
I did.
Thank you. And
With
is
the
there a second?
findings, with the findings, yeah.
So it's a motion to recommend to council. Correct.
Yes, with the findings that there's limited area for walking and pedestrian use. Vehicular traffic on Milpas is heavy and creates risk when residents need to step into the street. Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Thank you, Chair. I will cautiously second the motion. I agree that we have to be conscious of making sure that these types of ordinance are used to target certain people in our community that are dealing with life crises. But you know, as a local and growing up on the west side and having friends and family living on the east side that I would regularly visit, and having to experience the issues that this ordinance is hopefully going to help alleviate. I understand those residents who called in, you know, that they a lot of them were born and raised on the east side or have lived there for decades, and they've experienced a lot of hardships at no fault of their own. And you know, they're asking us for help to come up with a solution to address it. And I think that we need to do something. So I'd want to move this forward to the city council and get everyone's input to see if we can come to some sort of understanding of how this could benefit as many parties as possible.
Can I count that as a second?
Yes.
Thank you. And then I have a couple comments too, and one more question. So I agree with the motion and everybody's comments. I think it's crucial for the entire community to take our sidewalks as pathways and not residential spaces, and that they're not obstructed. I especially appreciate Mr. Kalan's mention of the word aspirational for that reason, to be able to use the sidewalk again. But it also, it has an aspirational sense to it also, given our experience on Kekik Street, that we actually moved, as a result of the sit-lie there, the extension there, we actually moved some people into transitional housing. Some people went in transitional housing, some people left the area, but if we had done nothing, in theory, conceivably, those people would still be camped out on the street. So it is aspirational that way too. Mr. Kalan, I just, my question that came to mind late was kind of the nexus to the alcohol ordinance. And has that, I should know the answer to this, but has that hit Planning Commission yet, or where are we on that? Because I see that as truly connected to part of the cause of what's happening when people are lying or sitting on the street incoherently, is our inability to control the sale of alcohol, particularly those small little airline style bottles. Could you update us on that?
I'd be happy to, Chair Jordan. The Planning Commission considered the off-sale alcohol regulation ordinance last Thursday. It raised, it's coming back for final action by the Commission on June 10th. And the alcohol ordinance is important. The only real opposition at the ordinance, excuse me, at the Planning Commission came from a lawyer representing some liquor stores on Milpas. The alcohol use ordinance will require the liquor stores that are regulated to maintain a nuisance-free environment around their stores. So if people are out in front of a store on the sidewalk, that will be something that we expect the liquor stores to deal with, either through lighting or landscape changes to prevent creating opportunities for people to gather and drink and hide That's basically the problem that gets created. So yes, the alcohol ordinance will be very important to helping this all be effective.
Okay, super. So there's a motion and a second to forward the recommendation in the agenda to full council. Ms. Crisante, could you call a roll call vote, please?
Yes. So forward recommendations to council was moved by Councilmember Sneddon, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Sneddon
Yes.
and Chair Jordan.
And that's a yes from me also.
Great, thank you.
So thank you, Ms. Crisante. Thank you to staff. That seemed pretty painless presentation and decision there, and we'll look forward to seeing that at council. And we will be adjourned until 2 o'clock for the full council meeting. Thanks.